especially on Hinge profiles, you got your political views, you put like conservative, you put like reform, and, anything far right, they look at you differently.
When you see the liberal woman over here, I mean, just being a man, they're going to look at you and think you're racist or whatever, because that's just the assumptions they make. But a lot of men will probably just be afraid to go talk to women, because these days, you can just say hello to a woman and they can blow it out of proportion. They can do many things.
Conservative men struggling with dating these days is nothing new. I've made a few videos on it on this channel, and usually that revolves around like the American context, because we have someone like Donald Trump. If you are a Republican, it's highly likely you voted for Donald Trump for president. And many Republican men still obviously support Donald Trump, despite him being just absolute terrible president, one of the worst in recent history. And obviously you can understand that, especially in straight relationships, Donald Trump's regime's war against women and the Republican war against women over the last like 5 or so years, that would obviously make loads of women immediately just think you're not worth it, right? And then we have people like Matt Walsh obviously influencing conservative men, and he says every conservative man actually wants a trad wife.
Timeless. It is not a primal, timeless desire for a colleague or a business partner. It is a desire for a wife, a woman he can provide for and fight for and conquer the world for. And in return, he wants a woman who will have his children and raise and love them and prioritize them above anything, and show him appreciation and respect and affection. That's what young men want. That's what any man wants. Almost every young man wants this.
And that has become increasingly common. Apart from conservative men, they want a trad wife, but they also want a trad wife to pay half of everything, so they need to get a job as well. So essentially they want a maid. And in the context of America, you can understand why like these conservative men aren't getting dates. But today we're going to talk about a different context. We're going to talk about the UK context, where I think it's different because in the UK, politics can often be a taboo subject. Now, if you've ever been in a UK workplace, it's like an awkward situation, right? Like there is like a general sentiment like, oh, aren't the government rubbish, regardless of who's in power? But we have something called shy Tories, where people will put up the front of being like generally uninterested, apolitical, but will like always vote Conservative or support the Conservatives. Or they just won't really care about politics, but they will lean Conservative and vote Conservative when it comes to elections. Now, I would say that politics isn't as much as people's personality in the UK compared to the US, but of course it isn't a secret that especially women looking to date guys, that conservative men are becoming increasingly unpopular because the American conservative movement is really changing the culture in the conservative movement in the UK, where the current Conservative Party is pretty much a far cry, is pretty different from the Conservative Party of maybe 15 years ago, where it is heavily influenced by America. But now we have something even more radical. We have an actual far-right political party that is gaining a lot of momentum and is even polling first in some polls, and that is Reform, led by Nigel Farage. So in this video, we're not just going to talk about Tory supporters not being able to get dates. We're going to be talking about far-right people, like open far-right people, wondering why women won't date them. And this comes as there's news that women tried to run as Reform candidates, but actually quit the party because it was too misogynist. I don't know what these women thought they were walking into. Maybe they thought their shared racism with the men would maybe make them not treat them in a misogynistic way. But I just want to talk about all of this today in like the context of Britain's rising fascism. And yeah, just before we go any further, follow me on Instagram, follow me on Blue Sky if you want to support the channel, check out YouTube memberships, and check out my Patreon page. And if you're new, potentially subscribe and like the video. So this was making the round. Politics Joe interviewed some like younger Reform supporters. The video is long and there's loads of things they cover, but what was going viral is them complaining that it's very hard to date, and let's get into that video.
The difference between left and right, especially on campus and all that, does make dating difficult in my opinion.
Especially on Hinge profiles, you got your political views, you put like conservative, you put like reform, anything far right, they look at you differently.
When you see the liberal woman over here, I mean, just being a man, they're going to look at you and think you're racist or whatever, because that's just the assumptions they make.
I understand freedom of speech, but I don't want to interact with anyone I think is a racist.
With the way culture works, a lot of men, I mean, I can speak for myself, but a lot of men will probably just be afraid to go to talk to women because these days you can just say hello to a woman and they can blow it out of proportion. They can do many things.
Women are very sort of like, if one thing's wrong, you know, if they have like one red flag, you know, then women won't date them, which is, you know, all good.
Reform UK's like as a society, I don't think they should be like banned, but I think that it's perfectly justified for the rest of us to maybe socially isolate them a little bit.
So you wouldn't be going on a date anytime soon with her?
Definitely not. No.
God, no.
A few weeks ago I was on Hinge and obviously you go through it and you can see your political views. I don't think I can name one time I saw a single woman that said conservative. Everyone is either liberal or they put nothing. Well, it's moderate. Moderate is fine, but it's always liberal. And immediately I'm going to say no to that because with my views, it's just not going to work.
So in this like very brief clip of these far right men talking about why it's difficult to date because everyone's a liberal, they're just like misogynistic. So it's kind of like, yeah, that's why you have a problem. At least one guy is saying, you know, I don't swipe on the women who have liberal in their profile, right? Because we're not going to have compatible views. At least that guy's being a bit more honest, but they're talking about it being difficult. And it's like, well, yeah, because there has been a baseline in British society, let's say since the 1990s, that in principle that women are viewed as equal, right? We all know in practice that isn't the case, but in principle, feminism achieved some sort of like baseline that most of society, at least in public, kind of accept, right? And it's obviously like a bare minimum. Obviously, with younger women as well, they're going to be more radical probably. And if they're university students, they'll be more radical. And also, women just tend to be left-wing, especially now we're seeing more polling data about reform and just far-right movements across Europe and America. It attracts young Gen Z men, and it's in direct contrast with what Gen Z women believe right now. And honestly, when you hear men like this speak, you can just hear like what they've been listening to, like the podcasts and YouTube videos, telling them like, oh, it's so scary to even talk to a woman. She might blow it out of proportion. It's kind of sad in a way that so many men feel like this because they're told it by people like Andrew Tate and people who hate women, that basically all women are scheming to destroy you, especially the liberal and left-wing ones because they're feminists and they hate men and shit like that. But yeah, like, it's not surprising that these people probably struggle in the dating world of university in general. But that's the thing as well. Everyone who's young in this country, and this goes back to the 1990s as well, but way before, since Thatcher, young people just always hated conservatives, like the Tory party specifically. And that has been seen as like a hard right thing. When you're going a step further and you're saying, no, the Tories, in their most far right version we've ever seen, they're actually not far right enough. So we actually need to like have this other party, which is like basically mask of fascist. And I'm going to be open about supporting them. And yeah, most people like that woman was saying, like, we might try not socially isolate you because in the UK context as well, making politics your personality is seen as cringe in regards to like specifically party politics. And that goes across the spectrum. If I meet someone who is like some Lib Dem activist or something, I'm going to think you're weird rather than me thinking you're weird for having some sort of liberal politics. Like if you guys have ever met people who are involved in party politics, I mean, I don't want to say bad things about all of them, especially some of the nice socialist members of the Green Party and the Labour Party. But if you meet people who are involved like the Tory party from a young age, especially in university, they are weirdos. So I can't even imagine what university students involved with Reform UK must be like. But let's go a bit further. So we've listened to that. And this is a problem many men are going to face. Like, let's say the next election, Reform come first or second, and loads of men are going to be open that they voted for them as they become increasingly normalised, but we're still having that split, of course, on gender, that one gender are going more left-wing, one gender are going more to the far right. So we're going to see more stories about men not being able to find dates. But let's just get into why women would even hate Reform UK in the first place. And I just got like a few little quotes for you. So this was before the last election. This is how like Farage was trying to get votes. So Farage condemned for saying influencer Andrew Tate is an important voice for emasculated men. Farage told the Strike It Big podcast, and said Tate was a very important voice for the emasculated. You three guys, you're all 25, you're all kind of being told you can't be blokes. You can't do laddish, fun bloke things. That's almost what you're being told. That masculinity is something we should look down upon, but something we should frown upon. It's like the men are becoming feminine and the women are becoming masculine, and it's a bit difficult to tell these days who's what. And Tate fed into this by saying, hang on, what's wrong with being a bloke? What's wrong with male culture? What's wrong in male humour? He fed into those things. His was a campaign of raising awareness. His was a campaign of giving people perhaps a bit of confidence at school, whatever, to speak up. Asked about the comments, Farage told The Guardian, "There's an awakening in a younger generation who've had enough of being dictated to, have had enough of being lectured to. They're seeing through the rubbish they're getting taught in schools and universities. If no other politician is willing to reach out to this group of people, then I will." So in the context of a very famous political leader saying all these positive, glowing things about like Andrew Tate, who might be extradited to the UK soon on all these terrible charges, then yeah, the people attracted to that party are probably going to share those views. So if you think you're going to get dates with just like random normal people who aren't even that political, but they'll know he said stuff like this because everyone knows about like Andrew Tate. And obviously like that Adolescence film was massive in the UK, so it's been part of the conversation for a long time. You can't expect that many people are even going to want to associate with you as like a friend, let alone getting into romantic relationships. Because your political views in this case are literally like straight up saying, like, I don't see you as equal. And I can see how people can delude themselves into thinking that if you support the Tory party, you could still be someone who views women equally because they're on their, fourth female leader. They often have women in the cabinets. They often have diverse cabinets as well. So you can trick yourself that, like, actually the Tory party do kind of like this liberal identity politics we've been fed since the 1990s. But with Reform UK, you can't even delude yourself into thinking that. But we do have a case of someone who did delude themselves. So this was back in the run-up to the election. Second Reform candidate quits, accusing party of racism and misogyny. Who would have thought the far-right party would be racist and misogynistic? So Georgia David, who had been Reform's candidate for West Ham and Beckton, issued a statement through the Conservatives, the party she's now backing. David said she'd been significantly frustrated and dismayed by what she said had been a failure of the party's leadership to tackle problems with its racism and prejudice in its ranks. "I am in no doubt that the party and its senior leadership are not racist." Well, they are, but the vast majority of candidates are indeed racist, misogynistic and bigoted. "I do not wish to be directly associated with people who hold such views that are so vastly opposing to my own and what I stand for." So I think that speaks to the type of people Reform attracts, that they probably don't even know like much about politics. Like, how can you be a woman going to actually run to be an MP for Reform and not realise it's a party of racism and misogyny? Literally every single headline I ever see about their candidates is them being like absolutely fucking terrible. Not to mention Farage obviously has a history of this stuff, and he said the Andrew Tate stuff before this story broke, right? So it shouldn't be a shocker to anyone. But again, if you're identifying with a party that is too racist and misogynistic for the Conservatives, right? And they see the Conservatives as a place where that doesn't actually exist, but your party does. It just shows you everything you need to know about what this political party actually is. Now, this political party as well, Reform, it's just so filled with the most terrible people. Like, especially if you're if you're a British man and you've seen the worst of football culture, just think about like the worst person you've seen in a football environment as a politician. That's Reform. Like, racist, xenophobic, completely caught up in like every single fucking conspiracy theory. It's like a party of Tommy Robinsons. And they don't even pay lip service to the liberal identity politics of the UK. Again, these Gen Z men supporting Reform, yeah, lots of people are going to think you're a fucking weirdo and loads of women are going to hate you. Now, it's been a big thing for a while that people just hate the Tory party, right? And obviously what the Tories have done to the UK. And while Reform is a step further, Glamour had a good article by Serena Smith last year saying, "I don't date Tories. Why dating in 2024 is more political than ever for women." Shortly after moving to Liverpool, 26-year-old Sally Galula went on a date with a man she met on Hinge. She was feeling quite optimistic about it until she arrived, but before I'd even have a chance to sit down, he said he'd seen my Instagram story. Tells Glamour she had posted a picture of a book she was reading, Heart of Race, Black Women's Lives in Britain. Galula's date was unimpressed. He said he'd hoped I wasn't one of those feminist types, she recalls. "I left before finishing my first drink." For many young women like Galula, different political beliefs are increasingly a dating deal breaker, especially in light of the looming election. A recent survey conducted by Tinder found that 71% of Gen Z said they wouldn't date someone with different political views to their own, while separate research published by YouGov found that women are less likely to be open to dating across the political divide. In addition, according to Bumble's 2024 dating trends, 1 in 3 women on the app believe it is a turn-off if someone they are dating is not aware of current societal issues. He says, "I will ask dates straight up about their politics on the first date, so I know whether to rule them out or not. I would like to be a parent one day, so when dating I always ask myself, could I raise a child with this person? Would I be proud of my child if I ended up having the exact same political beliefs as my partner? If the answer is no, then I wouldn't be able to see a future with them. Tara Prasad, 25, is another young woman whose politics colour her dating choices. I don't date Tories. 28-year-old Lily O'Farrell has a similar no Tories rule. Politics is the most important factor which informs my dating choices. I couldn't date a conservative. I just don't think I could see myself growing old with someone who has such big ideological differences to me. So those stories there obviously reflect what a lot of us would feel. I think regardless of gender, if you're watching this video, if you're a man as well, I'm sure you'd feel the same. But also I will say, knowing a lot of men, just generally, not close friends, but just like overall, and I said this to my sister when she was younger, I said, men don't really care about politics a lot of the time, because especially as white straight men, the society we live in was created by us for us, right? So we don't really have much to lose if certain parties gain power, like Reform UK, for example, right? So men will lie. And I said to my sister, like, men will agree with you, especially if you're passionate about politics. Maybe you would even speak to them about things you're passionate about, and they might like agree with you because they're happy to please you. Because often young men don't have strong principles. They just want to date women, right? And they don't really see that as a barrier, especially when they're kind of like safe in the knowledge that their like position in society won't be threatened by even your like leftist politics and stuff. But yeah, like it totally makes sense. And I've said it many times that politics aren't some abstract thing that have no relation to your values. Now, I'll obviously say there are plenty of people, and I'm sure even some of you watching this, you'll have partners who are like this. They are not engaged with, like, let's say, electoral politics, right? They might not even know much about geopolitics, but they might have good morals. And if you ask them to vote based on those morals, you know they wouldn't end up voting for like the Conservative Party or Reform and stuff, right? So I totally accept that some people, if you ask them about politics, they genuinely wouldn't really know what to say, because for a variety of reasons, they might not follow politics that closely. And in my opinion, Bowling said there, it's a deal breaker for some to not understand. And I do think, you know, for someone like myself, and if you're like me, I would never date someone who doesn't know what the fuck's going on with the world, because that to me fundamentally shows that you're not interested. And as someone who doesn't really believe in free will and believes we're all like a result of our conditioning and everything, I don't say this looking down on people, but I do find most people to be generally uninterested in things. And I think that's a result of many things, but one of them is our education system is really terrible. And I totally understand for women as well, as their rights are being attacked. If you are seeking a partner who's a man and they don't know fucking anything about what's going on and they don't really care, then yeah, it's just like maybe not someone you could see yourselves building a future with. I've obviously had a weird experience because me and my girlfriend have been together since we were 17, and I've always been like political in my own way. But that's what I mean about the morals thing. We always had like similar morals. So as we get older and develop like our politics more, they ended up being like obviously like very similar, and that made it easy to stay together. But I can totally understand how even if you do have that foundation of, you know, you really liked each other when you were younger and politics didn't really matter because you're 17 or whatever, but then you might have to split up because one person goes that way, left wing, maybe someone goes centre or centre right or whatever. But yeah, it's just fundamentally really important. I do understand how maybe politics aren't key to many relationships and shit like that. I have many friendships where we never even discuss politics, and lots of them are close friendships. So I totally understand how maybe you could develop a romantic relationship with people who don't really care. But in the world we are entering, and we've been in for a while now, feels like, you know, to a lot of people it'd be a red flag if you don't care. And if you support in England the outward far right whose leader says positive things about Andrew Tate, don't be surprised if women don't like that. That is it for the video. Let me know what you guys think in the comments, and if you made it this far, thank you for watching.